The hush of a first-class cabin is supposed to feel like sanctuary. Leather seats gleam beneath soft lighting, crystal glasses wait to be filled, and the air smells faintly of polished wood and luxury. But when Caleb Monroe and his partner Adrian Frost stepped through the aisle, that hush twisted into something else. Their clothes were simple white t-shirts, blue jeans, clean sneakers, and a single backpack each slung across their shoulders. No tailored suits, no polished briefcases, no designer luggage dragging behind them. Just two men who wanted nothing more than a quiet flight from San Francisco to New York. Yet, as soon as they lowered themselves into seats 2A and 2B, a ripple of disdain moved through the cabin like a wave breaking on glass. Most passengers aboard knew nothing of Caleb's journey from military service, where he'd hidden his true self for years, to founding Monroe Tech, now Silicon Valley's premier security software company. They couldn't see the countless nights he'd spent coding until dawn, or the meetings where investors dismissed him until his innovations proved undeniable. They saw only a man who didn't match their vision of first class, a small rainbow pin fastened to his chest, his fingers intertwined with Adrian's. Caleb had built his empire quietly, without the flash and spectacle that so many tech moguls embraced. He drove a modest car, lived in a comfortable but unremarkable home, and flew commercial always because he believed success shouldn't separate you from humanity, but connect you more deeply to it. Adrian, as chief legal counsel for the Washington Civil Rights Foundation, shared this philosophy. Power wasn't for flaunting, but for changing lives. They could have purchased the entire plane if they wanted. Instead, they purchased just 2 tickets and hoped, perhaps naively, for a peaceful journey. But peace was the first casualty when prejudice entered a room. And prejudice had just taken a first-class seat. No one knew that the simple gold band on Caleb's finger had been placed there by a man who'd argued landmark cases before the Supreme Court. No one recognized that the worn leather watch on Adrian's wrist was a gift from a tech visionary who'd revolutionized digital security. They saw only what they chose to see, 2 men who didn't belong in their exclusive world. If you've ever been judged based on appearances alone, you know the weight of those stares, the silent verdict of strangers who decide your worth without hearing your story. This is the tale of what happens when that judgment collides with an unexpected truth. When those who measure others by their covers discover they've been reading the wrong book entirely. Stay with this story until the very end. What happened in the skies that day became more than humiliation. It became revelation. And if you're new here, make sure to follow Hard Stories, because the stories we share are reminders of resilience, justice, and the quiet power of standing your ground even when the world wants you to move. The cabin had barely settled when Blake Thompson's voice cut through the ambient hum of the airplane. His cologne arrived before his words did, expensive and overwhelming. He stood in the aisle, phone pressed to his ear, discussing million-dollar deals with calculated volume, ensuring everyone knew exactly how important he was. His tailored suit, probably Italian, fit him perfectly. His shoes reflected the overhead lights like mirrors. The watch on his wrist cost more than most people's cars. When he ended his call and checked his boarding pass, his eyes narrowed at Caleb and Adrian, who were arranging their few belongings in their assigned seats. Blake's expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief, then hardened into something colder. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dripping with artificial politeness. "I believe you're in my seat." Caleb looked up, calm and measured. "Actually, we're in seats 2A and 2B. They're on our boarding passes." Blake's laugh was short and dismissive. "There's clearly been a mistake. I always get a window seat. I'm a Platinum Elite member." He gestured vaguely with his hand, as if membership status alone should clear the aisle of all obstacles, including people he deemed unworthy. The first whispers rippled through nearby rows. Judgments formed in sidelong glances. A woman in 1C pursed her lips. A businessman in 3A smirked openly. Caleb simply reached into his pocket and produced his boarding pass. "No mistake, sir. This is our assigned seating." Blake's eyes caught the rainbow pin on Caleb's chest. then drifted to their interlocked fingers. His face contorted briefly before he composed himself. With deliberate slowness, he pulled out his phone again, but this time activated the camera and began live streaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his online audience, holding his phone at an angle that captured Caleb and Adrian in the frame. "We have a rainbow couple who think they deserve first class." The words weren't just spoken, they were weaponized, designed to wound, to humiliate. Adrian's hand tightened around Caleb's, not seeking comfort but giving it, his eyes silently asking if they should simply move, avoid the spectacle, find peace elsewhere. But Caleb's expression remained unchanged. Years in the military had taught him about battles worth fighting, and dignity was always worth defending. The flight attendant, Sarah, approached cautiously. She had witnessed such moments before, the tense standoffs that happened when entitlement clashed with rights. Her smile remained professional, though strain showed at its edges. "Sir," she addressed Blake, "may I see your boarding pass?" Blake handed it over with the confidence of someone who expected the world to rearrange itself for his convenience. Sarah checked it against her tablet. "Mr. Thompson, your assigned seat is actually 5C, the aisle seat in row 5. Blake's face flushed. "That's impossible. I specifically requested a window seat. I'm not sitting in 5C. Fix it." What had begun as an inconvenience was quickly becoming a spectacle. Blake's live stream continued, comments flooding in, some mocking, some encouraging his behavior, all witnessing the public humiliation he intended for these two men who dared to occupy space he wanted. Security personnel appeared at the front of the cabin, summoned by another crew member. The situation was escalating beyond a simple seating dispute. It had become a public performance of power and prejudice, broadcast live to an audience eager for conflict. The fundamental truth revealed itself in that moment. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning, it's about refusing to accept that your dignity is negotiable. Every person watching would eventually learn that appearances reveal far less than character, and assumptions are often the first casualties when truth finally speaks. The cabin, thick with tension, shifted again when Jenkins, the flight manager, strode down the aisle. His shoes struck the floor with deliberate authority, each step rehearsed to project control. The crowd of passengers leaned subtly toward him, some with relief, others with anticipation, as though he had arrived to restore a natural order they believed had been disturbed. He paused at the row where Caleb and Adrian remained seated, folding his hands behind his back, posture crisp. His tone was calm, professional on its surface, but every syllable carried the sting of assumption. "Gentlemen," Jenkins said, "first-class passengers usually present themselves differently. We have standards here, and when appearances raise questions, it is our duty to investigate." His eyes scanned their plain clothing like a scanner programmed to detect fraud, ignoring entirely the legitimacy of the boarding passes. Caleb's expression did not change. He reached into his backpack with slow precision, withdrew the ticket stubs and identification cards, and placed them on the fold-out table in front of him. "Everything is in order," he said evenly. Jenkins picked them up, inspecting each as though searching for invisible ink, his thumb running along the edges with exaggerated care. He found nothing irregular. Yet, instead of handing them back, he hesitated. "I'll need to verify this further," Jenkins remarked, his voice carrying just loud enough for the cabin to overhear. Passengers exchanged murmurs, some nodding in quiet satisfaction as though their suspicions had been validated, others averting their gaze in discomfort. Caleb did not move. Instead, he slid a small object onto the table, its matte surface catching the overhead light. It was a sleek black business card, unmarked by decoration except for a discreet silver crest embossed in the corner. From the row just behind, Maria, another flight attendant, caught sight of the card. Her breath hitched, her eyes widened in recognition, lips parting as though she had seen a ghost. She leaned slightly forward, whispering to herself words no one else could hear. the disbelief etched across her face more powerful than any exclamation. Jenkins faltered just for a moment. His fingers twitched as he looked between the card and Caleb, suspicion fighting with a flicker of unease. But he quickly masked it, straightening his tie, pretending composure. Regardless why, he continued, until we can confirm everything, I ask that you remain patient. We cannot allow disruptions in this cabin. The words landed like a verdict. A calculated delay meant not to uphold order, but to preserve hierarchy. Adrian placed his hand gently on Caleb's shoulder, the gesture not of restraint, but of affirmation, as though signaling the moment had come. Around them, the air thickened. The crowd, sensing the stakes had risen, leaned closer. Blake lingered nearby, his phone still angled discreetly, hungry for the climax of a spectacle he believed belonged to him. The atmosphere shifted again when the cockpit door opened and Captain Rodriguez emerged. His presence carried a weight that neither Jenkins nor Blake could muster. The chatter dimmed as passengers watched him stride down the aisle, hat tucked neatly under his arm, authority radiating from every step. He stopped abruptly when his eyes fell on the black card still resting on the table. For a fraction of a second, the captain's composure faltered. His jaw tightened. His gaze darted from the card to Caleb's face, then back again. The recognition was immediate and unmistakable. This was not the look of a man confronting an unruly passenger. This was the look of someone realizing the entire power dynamic had shifted under his feet. Caleb rose slowly, his movements calm yet commanding. He slipped the card back into his pocket and met the captain's gaze head-on. Then, for the first time since boarding, his voice carried not just patience but authority. Caleb Monroe, he said, his words measured and clear. Chief Executive Officer of Monroe Tech. Our company supplies your airline with security software currently protecting 74 aircraft in service. I also hold a significant stake in Consolidated Airways, the parent group of this airline. The silence that followed was deafening. Every pair of eyes that had once judged him for plain cotton shirts and worn denim now dropped as if afraid to meet his gaze. Faces that had smirked moments earlier grew rigid, their superiority collapsing beneath the weight of revelation. Blake's live stream, still rolling, caught it all: the disdain, the taunting, the threats of removal, and now the undeniable truth. Adrian stood beside Caleb, his composure equally steady. Adrian Frost, he stated clearly, Chief Legal Counsel, Washington Civil Rights Foundation. He removed his wallet and displayed his credentials. We specialize in cases involving discrimination in public accommodations, including commercial aircraft. Blake's expression dissolved from smugness to horror as he realized his live stream had documented not just a confrontation, but potentially actionable discrimination against a major shareholder of the airline and a prominent civil rights attorney. His phone trembled slightly in his hand as comments flooded his stream, viewers now alerting him to the catastrophic mistake he'd made. Captain Rodriguez recovered quickly, his professionalism asserting itself. Mr. Monroe, Mr. Frost, my sincerest apologies for this misunderstanding. I can assure you this isn't how we typically treat our passengers. He turned to Jenkins with a look that promised later consequences. Please prepare the aircraft for immediate departure, he instructed Jenkins. Mr. Thompson, he addressed Blake directly. You will take your assigned seat immediately. Upon landing, airline representatives will escort you to our executive lounge to address your concerns. Blake's protest died in his throat. The power he'd wielded so confidently minutes ago had evaporated. He quietly moved to seat 5C, shoulders hunched, avoiding the gazes of passengers who had so recently been his audience. His live stream ended abruptly. The remainder of the flight passed in uncomfortable silence. Whispered conversations occasionally broke out discussions of what had transpired, the shocking revelation, the dramatic shift in power. Caleb and Adrian simply reviewed their documents for their meetings in New York, seemingly unaffected by the drama they'd been forced to participate in. When the plane touched down at JFK, Caleb whispered something to Adrian, who nodded in agreement. as promised. Airline staff met Blake at the gate, their expressions professionally neutral as they guided him toward the executive lounge. What he expected to be an opportunity for complaint would become something quite different. Blake entered the lounge anticipating a panel of apologetic managers ready to placate his wounded ego. Instead, he found Caleb Monroe sitting alone at a conference table, 2 water glasses placed neatly on coasters. "Please sit down, Mr. Thompson," Caleb said quietly. "We need to talk about what happened today and why it matters far beyond a disputed seat on an airplane." The conversation that followed wasn't about power, money, or status. It was about the fundamental respect every human deserves, regardless of appearance, orientation, or attire. Because dignity isn't earned through platinum memberships or Italian suits. It's an inherent right that no one should have to defend at 30,000 feet or anywhere else. "What you did today," Caleb began, his voice neither angry nor condescending, "wasn't just about a seat. It was about believing some people deserve basic dignity while others don't." Blake sat rigid, the reality of his situation sinking in. The man he had dismissed as unworthy of first class could end his career with a phone call, yet here he was, offering conversation instead of punishment. "I could ban you from this airline permanently," Caleb continued. "Adrian could file a discrimination lawsuit based on your live stream alone. But neither of us believes punishment without understanding creates meaningful change." Blake's gaze remained fixed on the table. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. "3 things," Caleb replied. "First, written apologies to every crew member affected by your behavior. Real apologies, not corporate templates. Second, your platinum status will be suspended for 6 months. During that time, perhaps flying like everyone else will offer perspective." Blake nodded silently, waiting for the final condition. "Third, Caleb said, "You'll attend the Diversity and Inclusion Workshop conducted by Adrian's Foundation, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to understand why today happened and how to ensure it never happens again." 6 months later, a letter arrived at Caleb's office. The return address belonged to Blake Thompson. Inside, pages of handwritten text detailed a journey of uncomfortable self-reflection. Blake described how the workshop had forced him to confront privileges he'd never acknowledged, how he'd begun implementing new policies at his own company, how he now understood that his worth wasn't diminished when others received the dignity they deserved. The transformation extended beyond words. Blake had become an active ally, using his considerable influence to support LGBTQ+ workplace protections. The incident that began with humiliation had catalyzed genuine change not just for Blake, but for an entire corporate culture. Meanwhile, Caleb and Adrian established a fund protecting LGBTQ+ airline employees from workplace discrimination. Jamie, the young flight attendant who'd witnessed everything that day, became the program's first director of diversity and inclusion. 1 year later, at a business equality conference in Chicago, the unlikely trio shared a stage: Caleb, Adrian, and Blake. Together, they recounted the story of a first-class confrontation that had become a first-class education in human dignity. "The measure of our character," Caleb told the audience, "isn't found in the seats we occupy, but in how we treat those with whom we share the journey. When everything else falls away, the money, the status, the titles, how we've treated others becomes our true legacy." The applause that followed wasn't just for a story well told, but for a truth well lived. In a world quick to judge based on appearances, sometimes the greatest power lies in refusing to accept those judgments as final. What would you have done if you witnessed discrimination in a public space? Would you have stayed silent or found the courage to stand up? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, follow Heart Stories for more narratives that remind us how courage and dignity can transform even our most difficult moments into opportunities for growth and understanding.